the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Hey, y'all, let's jump right into the start of today's episode. So before we get into my conversation with Matt Green and talking all things college football, I wanted to start off today's episode to talk about some Tennessee stuff. So one of the things that I've noticed this summer, and I wrote about it over on TPL Tennessee, where I am the senior editor covering all things Tennessee. So for all my Tennessee subscribers and watchers and everybody else, make sure you're locked in on the TPL Tennessee page. But I think one of the things that's most interesting in talking with Tennessee folks here locally in Knoxville and nationally, this, that, and the other, is the questions behind Nico Iamaleava, the five-star quarterback, sophomore or redshirt freshman coming into this upcoming football season here at Tennessee. There's a lot of excitement, and rightfully so, in terms of what Nico is going to mean for this football team. He's maybe the most hyped Tennessee quarterback since Peyton Manning. All signs to this point have been great. He was excellent in the bowl game, the Citrus Bowl against Iowa. Like, the vibes are extremely good when it comes to where Tennessee is at with Nico Iamaleava going into this upcoming college football season. The Heisman odds are high. The win-loss total betting odds are high. The schedule is really nice for Tennessee this year. But one of the things that people are a little bit concerned about, I think, is what it looks like behind them. And I think the last two cycles, a lot of college football, or a lot of Tennessee fans in particular, have really wanted to see Tennessee add some sort of big name journeyman quarterback to kind of back up, whether it was Joe Milton or back up Nico Iamaleava this season. But what you're seeing is that's just hard in the nature of the modern college football landscape, with the transfer portal and just how many options available for a lot of these guys, and so many teams all around the country desperate for quality quarterback play. It's hard to hoard multiple quarterbacks that can play at an elite level on one roster. And I think one of the things that kind of can be frustrating if you're a fan of a team like Tennessee, or you're really close, like the roster is really good across the board, but you're worried in some areas with depth of like, what happens if this happens? And that's where we're at in the offseason. We're here now in July, and a lot of folks are like, okay, well, what if Nico gets hurt? Then where does Tennessee turn? Well, here's the thing. Texas and Georgia are the exceptions in the sport right now in this regard, where in Texas you have Arch Manning going into his second season in Austin behind Quin Ewers. If Quin Ewers, who has been banged up the last 2 years at Texas, like if he gets banged up again this year, then you have a theoretically great alternative. We haven't seen Arch Manning play. We don't know what Arch Manning is going to be as a college football quarterback. The track record with the Manning family is pretty good, so you feel pretty good if you're Steve Sarkisian and company, but you still don't know. It also is going to be hard because ultimately Texas has college football playoff aspirations. They have a roster that can win the title. They're in the blue chip ratio. They are right there in the top tier, the big four going into this year, with Oregon, Georgia, and Ohio State. So they're in their own orbit, where they have both quarterbacks that you feel really good about. If something happens to Quinn, whatever, that you can turn to Arch in the season, and the expectations and the belief and all the magical components of a magical season are still in play. But if you're also Georgia, like they lose Carson Beck finally, the last couple of years, it's been, how is Georgia able to keep Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett, Brock Vandagriff, Gunnar Stockton? And then this offseason you thought, okay, well, it's finally happening. Georgia's dealing with the modern ramifications of just the transfer portal and where college football is, and Brock Vandagriff transfers to Kentucky. But then Jaden Rashada, late in the game, he ends up former four-star quarterback coming in from Arizona State. Obviously, there's the Florida story, this, that, and the other, but it's a big deal because it's another guy that, like, he played limited amount of time at Arizona State, but he's a super talented guy. You feel good about Gunnar Stockton if you're Georgia. There's just a lot of guys that are coming in to the fray here. And Georgia, like Carson Beck, should have a great final year at Georgia. It was a big deal to get him back. But again, Georgia and Texas are kind of in their own orbit in this regard, where when it comes to exceptional depth at the quarterback position. That's just not the case for the majority of college football teams, even the big time college football programs like Tennessee. So that's one part of why I think Tennessee fans might sometimes get a little bit nervous about the depth, is that there are some schools, a select few, but there are some that have maybe a little bit more comfortable depth behind their star quarterbacks at their universities. But I also wonder, as an NFL guy and an Atlanta Falcons guy, do NFL fans, like if you're an NFL fan listening to this, do you actually worry about this in the offseason? Do you worry about the depth behind you? Like Falcons obviously drafted Michael Penix, and the fans were mad that you had two quarterbacks that you have. And obviously this is not a apples to apples comparison with the NFL and college football, but it's hard enough getting one franchise quarterback in the NFL. It's hard enough to just find your Patrick Mahomes, find your Trevor Lawrence, find your big time guy. Like it's just you're maybe like Packers fans. They hope it's Jordan Love. Like it's not normal to be able to go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers and to maybe Jordan Love up there in Green Bay. But I think once you have that franchise guy in the NFL and you're an NFL fan, you feel great. Like Buffalo Bills fans the last couple of years have gone into every season like, who knows what can happen? Maybe some years they feel better than others, but for after the longest time, they have a franchise quarterback. They have their next star for years and years to come, hopefully, in Josh Allen. So they're not really worried about who's backing up Josh Allen. Colts fans, when they had Peyton Manning, they weren't worried about Curtis Painter, Jim Sorgi, what have you. It's just a college thing is what I've noticed. It's a Tennessee fans where it seems like they might be a little bit extra nervous about what it looks like behind Nico Iamaleava. Maybe it's because he hasn't played yet and you're outside of the bowl game at Iowa is why there's a little bit of concern there with the depth behind Tennessee. If he runs a lot, because he ran a lot in the bowl game, like what happens if Nico gets hurt for a couple games and they have to go to Gaston or they go to Jake or whoever they go in that regard. The thing is, you have the franchise guy. You have this all talent and Nico coming into the fold. Like that's what your focus should be on, because if something, God forbid, happens to Nico or he misses some time or this, that, and the other, then like everything's going to change no matter what. Like that's how it's going to be for the majority of NFL teams. Like the Buffalo Bills, if they lose Josh Allen for an extended period of time, the season changes drastically. When the Colts lose Peyton Manning, when the Patriots lost Tom Brady, like the season changes no matter what. Like you can feel good about a backup quarterback, but ultimately, if your star guy, your franchise guy goes down or you don't have like it's just the season's going to be drastically different no matter what. So I understand the feeling of like wanting to have stacked depth in every position at your school. Quarterback's one of the hardest to stack that depth in the current college football climate, but I also just don't think it matters as much as a lot of folks might seem to worry about it. Especially with who we think might be the best team in college football this year, where they don't even have a definitive quarterback one. We think it's going to be Will Howard, but Kyle McCord obviously did not work out last year for Ohio State. We'll see what Chip Kelly brings to the fold at Ohio State, but they have no idea what they have in their quarterback room right now. It could be Devin Brown. It could be Will Howard, but we'll see. We'll see if Ohio State is able to figure it out there. If Nico is a Heisman quarterback, there's just no way an injury or something to that effect that happens to Nico doesn't drastically change Tennessee's ceiling regardless. So when this question comes up about the quarterback depth behind Nico and frustration from fans about not being able to get a veteran junior, senior guy who's bounced around a little bit, like I guess a Casey Thompson is the best example of this, who I don't even know where he's at. I think he's at school 4. What I think is so interesting is that that's just, if Nico's a Heisman guy, part of the reason that it's hard to bring in somebody this offseason to back up Nico as a junior, senior, Casey Thompson type is like, there is growing belief, and it's like what Nico can ultimately be at Tennessee. Nico is a Heisman potential guy. So you should just feel good. Focus on feeling good that you have this super talent at quarterback in Nico Iamaleava that schools all over the country would love to have. Like, you're in a great situation. You have the guy, you have the 5-star, you have this all talent who's going to be your quarterback, hopefully for the next 2 years. Yeah, depth is not going to be what you want behind him because of that. But you still got George McIntyre, 5-star coming in, commit right now, going into next year. You're going to have young depth. You still have Jake Merklinger, who extremely talented freshman, true freshman coming in here this year. Gaston knows the offense. He's been with Heupel forever. He's going to be solid. I think there's the way I look at it is I think fans want to feel good about everywhere because Tennessee's got depth at receiver. They've got depth at running back. They've got extreme amount of depth on the defensive line. I think they have a lot of depth at linebacker. I think they're going to have depth at corner this year. I think there's depth in a lot of areas, but I think fans just feel better about having, specifically in the college game, having at least another guy, another veteran behind their guy. And they also can look around because it's a hyper competitive sport. Like, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're keeping up with what Georgia's doing too, if you're a super fan. So you see that Georgia's able to keep some of these guys. You see that Texas has Arch waiting in the wings behind Quin Ewers, but it's like, that's a rarity. And it's also like, if Nico is who all scouts have looked at, and Nico is this big Bryce Young type and is a Heisman type quarterback for the next 2 years at Tennessee, you're not going to be thinking about the depth. Like, that's just not going to come up because depth matters more in the trenches when you rotate. Like, the quarterback position, you don't want to rotate. This is not running back where Tennessee is rotating a lot. This is not what you want to do. Like, this is going to be the Nico show, hopefully, for the next 2 years here in Knoxville. And if that's the case, the quarterback depth behind him really doesn't matter. Michigan right now, it's uncertain. We don't know who their starter is going to be. Notre Dame, if Riley Leonard doesn't stay healthy, like, it's a drastically different season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Like, they could go undefeated this year. Schedule looks good. But if they need Riley Leonard healthy, or the whole season's different. But fans can't freak out about the depth behind Riley Leonard because you brought in Riley Leonard as a transfer to get you over that hump. Like, that's the season, is what Riley Leonard is for Notre Dame, is a big deal. Dylan Gabriel, the same way. Been in college forever, been really good at Oklahoma, at UCF. He's got to be great at Oregon for them to win the title and, reach that next level for Dan Lanning in Oregon and maybe potentially win the Big Ten. But they're going to be going right up there against Ohio State, Michigan, and the Penn State and the big boys up there. But if Dylan Gabriel gets banged up, Dante Moore, he played a little bit last year, but do you feel great if you're a Duck fan that he's ready to go and he's going to be able to get where Dylan Gabriel might be able to get your team going into this college football season? Like, next year, you hope he's the guy. This year, you still really need Dylan Gabriel to stay healthy. Tennessee needs Nico Iamaleava to stay healthy. Georgia needs Carson Beck to stay healthy. You look all across the college football landscape, that's what needs to happen. Brady Cook has to stay healthy at Mizzou. It's just the nature of the beast. So this is my way of saying, Tennessee fans, if you're worried about the depth behind Nico Iamaleava coming into the 2024 college football season, don't really worry about it. Like, it's a good spot. You are in an enviable spot across the college football landscape, and just enjoy it. Like, this should be a really fun season, but don't overthink the quarterback depth behind Nico. There are other position groups that depth is definitely something that is going to be paramount, specifically on the offensive line. Tennessee really needs some guys to pop there behind the starters this season. But depth at quarterback, like, that's not one to freak out about, especially when you have somebody as talented as Nico Iamaleava under center going into this year.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.